Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Paddle Pursuit. We're back here on the show. I'm your host, Robert Norman, and we're here today with James Dunbar, the
Hey,
ultimate Chatted Jack champion. Year after year, kicking ass on the course. I think he was born in a canoe, single blade terror, traveling the world in racing. He didn't know I was going to have this whole intro for him, right? Look at this. So, James, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the show and share some of your knowledge and experience with our audience.
yeah, absolutely. Really stoked to be here and appreciate the enthusiastic introduction. I'll try to live up to the hype.
So, James, I actually don't know your start into the sport and some of that progression. So, kind of walk us through how did you get tricked into being a paddler?
Well, I can actually point to one of my childhood friends back in high school. So I grew up in Portland, Oregon. And back in like the late aughts, I think I started in 2008. It was really a big heyday for youth dragon boat teams back in the day. Portland has a really robust scene and still does, I would say, but particularly a youth scene. We had the Portland Dragon Boat the Rose Festival Dragon Boat Festival, and that was with the Kaohsiung style boats, where they're big. You get a flag catcher, and you finish the race by plucking a flag out of a buoy. And that because it had such a big like community team component to it, I got about a whole bunch of people into paddling. And then we had the Hong Kong style boats in the Portland Dragon Boat Festival in like September or so. And one of my buddies one day was like, James, are you doing a spring sport? This is like, junior year of high school. You got a spring sport? How about you come down and do this dragon boat thing? And I was like, what is a dragon boat? And the rest is history. I'd never been on a competitive team sport like that before. I was always into swimming. And then I had a brief stint in wrestling and realized that paddling was way cooler, especially because they were able to lure me with big races up in Vancouver, which I believe is happening this weekend, the Concord Pacific Dragon Boat Festival. That was just something that routinely we could go to every year because we're in Portland. It's only, a bus ride away. And so I did that all throughout high school, just like really dedicated to dragon boating on the youth team. We had like 11 youth teams that we competed against. And sadly, the scene kind of dwindled away after several years. By the time I moved to the East Coast, we were kind of down to like maybe three youth teams. And mostly due to, I think, lack of like having a transition plan, coaches, volunteering their time, burning out, and then, like I can't do this anymore, and not having a successor named. A theme we may return to in this podcast, perhaps. But so I stayed in Portland for my undergrad. I went to University of Portland and got involved in coaching the youth team that I was previously a part of, and then paddling on the adult team and continued to do that until I graduated in 2016. And then we decided we being, well, she's my wife now, but my girlfriend at the time, Kate, we decided we're going to move to DC for jobs and such, as one does. And so we moved out in 2016. I found a team through a mutual connection. I had done the Team USA circuit a couple of cycles, started on back in 2013, going to Hungary. And then 2015 was when I met a buddy from DC, and he's like, come paddle with my team. And I was like, oh, cool. It's just right there, on the Anacostia River. And that's how I got in with DC Dragons. And also NCA Outrigger, both housed under the same club, which was really cool, all under one roof, Outrigger, Dragon Boat, what more could a guy ask for? And it only took them about 4 months to realize like, oh, this guy knows how to coach. We are going to promote him to coach. So I didn't take much of a break. And then I started coaching and particularly getting involved in the higher performance coaching program. We call it DC Dragons Performance. And we really like put a lot of emphasis on trying to get folks into OC1s. That was particularly a growth moment when I tried out for the U24 team in 2017, and then I accidentally trained too much and got onto the Premier team instead. So that's how I ended up on Premier Open in China, and that's really what opened my eyes to like a dragon boat by itself is really just like half the ball game. The other ball game is really outrigger canoe. And then I got bit by that bug, and started doing the East Coast like small boat circuit in 2018. Real just like went all up and down, probably went to way too many races, like multiple weekends in a row. And through that got myself onto Premier Open and mixed in 2019 to Thailand. And that was a real couple of good years. And then, you know, after that, we all know what happened after the end of 2019. That was probably a pivotal moment for everybody for obvious reasons, but COVID really like shut down our team. And I think it put a lot of strain on just like people's ability to even conceive of how to do the sport and balance like all like professional lives and such. And so we took a long time to grow back out of COVID. I think we were all really burnt out. And from there, you know, we've been rebuilding, and I really think I think a lot of us asked ourselves like, what are the things we really liked most about our sport that we don't have anymore? And you know, now it's time to focus on those things. And I think for myself personally, I really liked the aspect of growth, constantly growing and constantly being pushed, both like physically, but also like these technical skills. And that's, I think, what led me to really start leaning into ultra distance, and getting more involved with marathon canoe. So 2019 was when I did Chattajack, and that was the year where they sent out a gale force wind warning the night before, and I was like, what in the world am I getting to? The previous long race I had done was 20 miles Blackburn, up in Massachusetts, and this is, you know, 50% longer at least. It's like, oh God, what am I doing here? But that was I won that one. That was very nice. It was a culmination of probably way too much training, and not very smart training, but it worked out. I was really pleased with my results, and I took away a lot of good lessons. And I think I kind of got bit by that ultra distance bug at that point. So I'm like, well, what's bigger than Chattajack? Well, if you double it, you can do the Clinton. So I found I found a good partner to do the Clinton. Actually, she recruited me. She'd been working on trying to recruit me for the Clinton for a while, and I was like, all right, let's do it. I was fresh off of getting a grad degree, and was like, I need to get back into training again and paddling. I want to do something epic. And so I got into marathon canoe and did the Clinton. That took 9 hours. That was a really hard and challenging race. And then after that, I was like, what's even harder than that? And then the next year in 20, I think, was it 22 or maybe it was 23, I did the 70-48. That's from Tacoma to Port Townsend in Washington State. And that one's actually 70 miles. And was probably the grindiest grind I've ever grinded in my life. It was really cold, even though it was June. And I've never grinded so much where you're just staring at a teeny little light and just like, all right, I'm just going to go that way for 5 hours and then pivot to, 30 degrees and go that way for 5 more hours. Like that was that at night, but I kept returning to Chattajack, trying to take, each of these lessons that I had been, gathering from racing more, talking to people more experienced than me, trying to, put more tools in my toolkit, train smarter, not harder. And I was thankful to team up with a couple of really good buddies for the past 2 years at Chattajack, and Greg and Kelly Truitt. Those were really great years racing. And I'm hoping, I'm sure we've all got Chattajack on the brain for this year as well. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Between that and the Molokai solo and the Gorge and then Wild Buffalo, I think I've got a pretty packed year currently and in the future at this point. So it's been a big journey from like Dragon Boat as the gateway drug, as I'm sure a lot of people are, all the way through just like the world opening up as like I get exposed to more and more different paddlers, different environments to paddle in. It's just like, wow, that this sport is as varied and like competitive as there are like rivers and oceans that we have access to. So it's been a huge journey, and I feel like I'm still at the very beginning of it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's really cool seeing the snowball effect, right? Like starting on like a rec team grabbing flags, right, on a race course. And like you said, there's a lot of variability with the different outlets. You have the different conditions, you have the different distances, you have the different boats, right? Um, Looking at ultra distance, right? Have you Kelly, so you know about the Texas Water Safari, which is 200 and something, 260, I think. The MR 340 is 340 miles. Have you considered like the true ultra distance, multi-day, 24, 48 hours of racing level of course length?
Oh boy, those I feel like I need to get past a mental barrier in order to get to like something over 100 miles long. I think part of it is the overnight aspect. I cleared that with the 7048 because that one took 12 hours from 7 p.m. to basically 7 a.m. But I think it's the once you go from like nighttime to then daytime afterwards, and then folks say like, and then you start hallucinating. That's when I start to get a little skittish. So I've had folks ask like, hey, are you ever going to do the Asable? That's only like an extra 4-ish hours past the 7048. Haven't quite gotten that far myself. And with the MR 340, that I mean, what's the average finish time for that? Like a couple days, a few days?
Yeah, it's like 40 if you're single blading it, because it's a 5 mile an hour current, right? So when you're not paddling, you're still going fast. So I mean, there's times you're going 10 or 11 miles an hour steady for hours on hour, right? So I think like the overall course record is like 30 something hours, but most people that are fast are 40-ish hours. So like you said, you got to deal with like two night cycles finishing it fast. And other people are like, 98 hours or something.
Yeah, I think I'll never say never, but I'm not quite there yet. I'll settle for events, let's say 14 hours and less for the time being. Maybe it's the Asable is in my future, and that'll break that barrier for me, but I'm not quite there yet.
So, staying on the topic of races and whatnot. So, the whole idea came, Benjamin Bank, he mentioned you on the podcast a few times. So, your name was like right on my mind. And then the best part, right? He's talking about Molokai and he's so nonchalant about it. Like, yeah, man, there's like 18 to 20-foot swells. And like my eyebrows are like going off the screen, like, holy crap. And if you listen to him, it just sounds like another day at the park. Like, yeah, I just go to the lake and 20-foot waves or something, right? And I needed perspective from somebody that I know does not have clear access to 10-foot seas, 15-foot seas, 20-foot seas. And so I wanted your perspective on Molokai this season, being somebody that, like you said, is not in that environment, jumping headfirst into it, and tell us about that experience.
Yeah, not even, I would say not even 5 foot seas. We're lucky if we get 3 foot swells out on the Chesapeake Bay, which is tidally influenced. And if it's if you get a good downwinder, you can get some decent bumps. I would call that like maybe like a decent day on the gorge, but nothing spectacular. That's about as good as we get over here. So I'm for your listeners that don't know, I'm based in DC, and just an overview of like what resources and where, like what's our environment that we're paddling in. We've got two rivers that are pretty darn flat, the Anacostia and Potomac River. They converge in DC. That goes out to the Chesapeake Bay, and so 45 minutes away we can get to Annapolis, and honestly any other spot on the bay that we want to. When it's the wind is going, it's going enough to get us out there. But it's nothing compared to the gorge. It's nothing compared to actually paddling in Hawaii. It's nothing compared to paddling in Southern California or in San Francisco or anything like that. Like we are truly like flatwater paddlers, and it's a big pain in the butt just to get any decent waves. So like I had been trying to suck up as many different downwind runs as possible just to like get familiar with trying to, I don't know, maneuver my boat in waves, recognizing that like this is nothing compared to what I'm gonna get out there later, but trying my darndest to just like get some fundamentals down. I think in retrospect, having gone through it, I like to say I was minimally qualified to finish that race. I think I finished 100 and 105 out of 118 or something like that. Like it wasn't spectacular, but gosh darn it, I finished that race. And I don't think I really knew what I was getting myself into. um, uh, so Ben was very generous enough to loan me his boat and show me kind of the ropes, along with some other buddies. When I got out there, we did a run from Hawaii Kai out kind of along the wall, just to take like the last few miles in to see like what's the finish line going to be like. Going reverse was pretty gnarly. I flipped just getting out to the turnaround point a couple times, and it's just a whole freaking washing machine because swells are bumping off of the cliff face, and I'm like, what the heck am I doing here? And then we turn around and it's all just sloppy. Like I've been in sloppy from the Hudson River before, but like this is nothing. That was nothing compared to what what I was getting tossed around in. And like then after we did that run, one of my buddies was like, all right, just imagine that, but like 30 to 40% bigger. And I was like, oh God, I'm gonna die. I didn't tell that to my wife, who was much more risk averse than I am, and was only willing to go along with this idea with knowing that I knew what I was doing. And I think in a very basic level, knew what I was doing, but I was really like searching for some really key techniques and tools to just like keep me safe. The biggest thing I was worried about is going ama under, and especially because the swells were going one way, but I needed to go. Let me think here. The swells were coming kind of from my quartering from my right to my left, but I needed to stay kind of north. That would have taken me south if I just came with the big swells. So like if I caught a big swell, like one of these massive bombers, and I cut too hard of a line to the right, I would, it might spin out and I'm under, and then I'm, in the middle of the channel with a broken boat that isn't even mine. So I wanted to very much avoid that. I knew I had the endurance, like I'd done races much longer than that, but I really just like, I wanted to finish and I wanted to have fun. Um, and we it really started to hit me when we flew over to Molokai, just like I might be in a little over my head. When like we get on one of the little tiny commuter planes, there's maybe like 8 people on it. You feel it kind of wobbling back and forth as you're going down the runway, and I'm just like eyes shut the whole time. I'm a bit of a nervous flyer. And it's gusting pretty hard, like I think 25-30 mile an hour winds. And I think my average heart rate was like 110 the entire 45-minute trip there. And I was like, I'm not flying back. I have to paddle now after we landed. And so, just chatting some more with folks much more experienced than me, asking like, all right, what do you recommend? Someone like me, I got the endurance, but what's going to keep me the most safe? And they're like, just make sure you stay straight, let the boat rock underneath you, don't be a hero, don't try and do anything super crazy to like get the next wave, just like let them go by and just focus on staying upright. And I think that really helped. It helped calm me down, and it helped just keep me focused on what was the most important part. Because I don't think I couldn't conceive of like what the conditions were going to be like out there. Um, and so when the race started, it was already kind of hectic just getting out there, waiting for these like the waves to come in. Were pretty steep to the beach, and just like trying to like time it and then run out there. And for the first few miles, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be fine. But everybody telling me like, wait till like mile 6, and then you'll see what it's gonna be like. And then mile 6, um, actually it was really slightly before then. So the chase boats, the escort boats, released about 30 minutes in, or so. And what's that Mike Tyson phrase? Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the face. And that, like, all that chaos, like 100 escort boats, that was me getting punched in the face over and over. I'm just like, what is happening? I was like tailing a few people and like keeping up with them, thinking like, oh, I can do this. And then it was just like absolute anarchy. Like the craziest washing machine also swells. Also trying to make sure that like my escort could find me. Thankfully, I had on my phone enabled like the find like the GPS. So my wife is in the boat trying to like look for me, because you can't see any paddlers. Like you're going up, they're going down, they're disappearing and reappearing. But she kept refreshing that app and like, pinpointed me pretty close to like 35 minutes. Other folks, I'm sure you've heard that they didn't find their escort until almost to the end or halfway through the race. But I had my escort, pretty quick. And I credit that that little like putting your phone in a dry bag and just turning the GPS on, really clutch, I would say. And so they found me pretty quick. And then the swells just kept getting bigger and bigger. And then I didn't know, it didn't click at that point, but afterward, Ben was like, some of those wave faces were longer than the canoe. And I was like, yeah, I guess they were. Some of those massive, really steep guys that I was trying really hard to just let it pass under you. You don't really know how to handle it. Just stay upright. But yeah, I was on the verge of like freaking out most of the time, I think. I was able to catch some pretty decent waves. I was very inefficient though. And I definitely was trying to chase after waves that I probably shouldn't have, just because it wore me out too much. And I did have a couple of close calls. There was one time where I flipped on the right side, which that was fine, recovered, nothing got lost. And then I actually got bucked off about 15 minutes later on the left side and almost went ama under, but I did not. My leg got stuck in the cover. I was using a kahele, and that sort of kept me tied to the I had a leash on, but it kept me a little more connected to the boat, and I was able to just kind of force my way back in, and vowed to be a little more careful after that. But yeah, just like the I and then I think once I got to mile 12, like after a couple hours, I kind of started to figure it out. The waves were they had been as big as they were going to be. Um, you know, I think by like mile 6, I want to say. And I was starting to figure out like, oh, okay, kind of do this, kind of do that. And it was really just like all intuition, all just like testing cause and effect. Like, all right, a wave comes up like this. If I power up and kind of follow it that way, what happens? Oh, that didn't work. All right, let's try going a different way and see how catching that works. Um, and that was working. I feel like I'm definitely a better surfer. Like I gained 4 hours and 44 minutes extra surfing time that I didn't have before. And before then, my only surfing was some downwind runs on the bay, 2 weeks at the gorge, and that's pretty much it, actually. A couple of Hawaii Kai runs, and that's kind of it. So it was really a period of growth, like from start to finish. Um, I did have one instance where I was really worried, where I got my I was using the Stingray, and that was serving me really well, actually. I was using the larger size Stingray, and that gave me the bite I needed. But it got kicked out of my hand by a wave. Luckily, I had a spare a ZRE outrigger paddle, but my escort boat is like off in the distance a little ways. I start waving at them and they come get me, and I'm still trying to unwrap my, while still like trying to stay upright. And I shout at them like, paddle, paddle. And like, the paddle's like, 100 feet behind me at this point. Like I drop it and it just goes phew behind me. And there goes, a $400 plus paddle. I'm like, oh crap. But the guy, uh, like the dude that was my escort, was just an absolute champ, really good at his job. Hiring a really qualified and experienced escort captain is absolutely clutch, both in terms of handling the conditions, but also like taking care of you. He managed to like sweep around, and like while sitting in his chair, just like he spotted it, scooped it up, and was just like, look, I got it. And I was like, oh my God, wow, thanks, man. But it was so chaotic. I was like, I'm not paddle swapping. I'll just keep going on this another 3 hours or so. um, and then yeah, I made sure to pack everything on the boat. I didn't get anything from the escort boat. I was like, it's too messy. I'm not gonna be able to do this safely. So I just kept, relying on my previous long distance paddling, and just like, steady grinded it out, caught some waves, missed a lot of waves. But yeah, it was definitely a soul defining experience, I would say. And I was intending to go to the race thinking like, I'll come back and tell all my East Coast paddling buddies, like, it's not that bad. You just got to get the logistics figured out. And I absolutely failed at that. I was like, guys, it was the biggest it's ever been in 20 years. And I don't recommend anybody go out there unless you get some serious downwind experience. I kind of was taking a gamble. But so that from a flatwater paddler's perspective, that was intense.
Yeah, and I think that's what adds to the mysticism of the molokai. And it supersedes individual paddler skill, right? So like Chattajack conquering that race, whooping ass, right? And then going out there, there's more to it, right? Like it's not just about paddling and being comfortable in an outrigger canoe. It's being comfortable like in that part of the ocean. And a lot of the guys that are very good at that course have run that course a lot, or they have literally lived out there, right? And that is, a large percentage of the success of, conquering specific courses is if you have access to that course or something that is very similar to it. And that's where paddling is very geographically dominant, right? If you live on a coast somewhere, you're probably going to be good at ocean paddling because it's your only outlet. Navigating a river with a lot of current is super tricky. If it's the first time you've ever been on a 5 mile an hour current, it's probably not going to be a flawless run, right? And so 20-foot swells, for anybody that wants context on that, go up to your nearest light pole, look up to the top, and imagine the wave is up there. And like you said, you're in the boat and it's 20 feet long. So you're not literally at the bottom of it looking up 20 feet, but you're on this face that is as long as a light pole, right? It's like, it's freaky, right? Like you can't even, like you said, you can't even describe it. You just have to live through it and warn others before they tread and think that that's like a simple thing to overcome. So
Yeah, and I think and I think that point about specificity is really important, because like what in the like I've kind I think I've carved a bit of a niche for myself, a competitive niche. Like it's like flat water, long distance, outrigger canoe. Like that's kind of what we're good at out here, because that's really all we can do. And I went to Wild Buffalo. I did the channel crossing. I am bad at surfing. I'm trying to build a intuition for surfing starting at like age 28. I'm like about to turn 32 now. It has been very slow going. And hats off to the folks that start, learning in the youth programs when you're like 8 or 10. Like, you're going to be set. It's really hard to build that intuition later in life, I want to say. And so I think it really is humbling to go to someone else's turf, especially conditions that you are not used to, and just like watch them absolutely kill it and dominate. Um, and it's really cool to it's really helpful to eat that humble pie frequently, I think, because I think it keeps me like, I can see like, okay, there's still a lot more to learn, and it keeps me really like engaged in just trying to pick up as many skills as possible, keep the progression going, learning more. It's been really, really fulfilling, even though sometimes it's a bit scary.
Yeah, that's the best part about paddling in different disciplines. So even within the canoe, the marathon boat, the outrigger canoe, the dragon boat, the OC6, they're all different disciplines, right? And like you said, when you pursue high level racing in any discipline, you will find somebody in that arena, and that's their only arena, right? And it is all these little niches put together in a very specific way. But oh, do you do short distance? Hell no. I only do the long distance. Or if you talk to a sprinter, why would I race for 5 minutes when I can be a world champion in 2 minutes, right? Like, you have all these people that will commit to one idea. And like you said, it's cool to travel in all these different worlds and absorb that knowledge of when somebody commits their entire existence to one niche, what is that information that you can get from them, right? And you don't get to interact with them if you stay in your own arena, right? And a lot of people don't want to venture out because, like, oh, I've gotten good at this one thing. I don't want to go and be bad at something else, right? So, like you said, it sucks eating the humble pie sometimes, but there's a lot that comes to it. And doing a molokai is that puts you on a list of people, man. It's only got 100 names on there. And in the world of paddling, that is a short list comparatively to Chattajack, 700 people, Gorge, 500 plus people, right? So, you're doing these events that have less and less people participating in it. So you get to put that in your back pocket for the future. So we're looking at coaching, right? So we're gonna pivot back and we're gonna get James fired up, right? So first it's gonna start nice and mellow, and then we're gonna like add some oil to this pan until it catches on fire here. So
Excellent.
so walk us through coaching at DC, right? And some of that progression. You said it's been 13 years at DC, or has it been coaching 13 years total?
It's been total, I want to say 13 years. I'd have to do the math again, but the past, how long have I been in the district? Since, let's say I really started coaching them in 2017. So I guess it's been 7 years here, and then whatever that difference is back in Portland. But I didn't coach adults in Portland. This was the first time since when I moved to DC. That's when I was coaching adults, which was a bit of a shift, a fun shift, I think. um, youth are so impressionable. Almost all of them are starting from scratch. They have never held a paddle in their lives, and a lot of adults that have joined our club have as are like brand new to the sport as well. But we do get a lot of recruits from other clubs because DC is a bit of a transient city. People always moving in, moving out. We do have our core that's kind of been here and like is fairly rooted, but we do have some flux. And so a lot of folks from other teams come in. Um, and so I think because I was really interested in the Team USA program, they kind of was like, well, James, we got this competitive program that we want to try and lift off the ground. And I think I've found that aspect really rewarding, like taking people on the same journey essentially that I took myself on, but with a lot less like structure and support when I first moved here. So I think that aspect has been absolutely rewarding, like taking people and just helping them realize they're like really competitive goals and aspirations, especially because usually they come into it with a lot of determination and drive and just like don't exactly know how to execute. And I was like, well, I've made all the mistakes. Let me tell you how to do it.
So, coaching becomes a labor of love, right? And so you were talking on, the youth coaches, when you started, that began to fizzle out because there wasn't infrastructure to providing an incentive for them to stick around for eternity, right? Like there's, if they're doing it because they enjoy it, but it doesn't make sense monetarily, time aspect wise, right? And so give us some of your viewpoints on dragon boat coaching in the US currently from that perspective of how clubs are run, how they treat their coaches, and some of, that aspect.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially because and I've started sharing this more widely now. It's not a secret. I do plan to take a step back from coaching teams after this season, partly to, pivot to a different phase in my life. My wife and I are thinking of starting a family, and I think it's now is the time to think about like what's a transition plan. How do I just not leave like a big hole in the administration of the team and also like the coaching of the team. I still plan on participating as like a paddler and such, but like it's time to, with minimal disruption, start bringing in the next phase of coaches and leaders and team managers, et cetera. And especially reflecting back on my experiences in Portland, watching youth coaches who were kind of a solo act, I think, in a lot of regards. They had parents that were helping out manage the team, but they phase out in 2 to 3 years, and so like, all right, you're constantly having to retrain new folks. So I do appreciate that about adult teams. Folks tend to stick around a bit longer. And like accumulate a lot more knowledge. Um, but I think it was one of my coaching mentors, Connie Flesser. She's like, you're not a successful coach until you've successfully transitioned to the next coach. And I really take that to heart, and thought about really like how do you set it up so there's minimal disruption, and just how do you get coaches to stick around, because it is like you said, a labor of love. I think the current structure that we have, which is basically the model that every other club in the US has. You have to set up a paddling 501c3. You get your volunteer board, you get your volunteer coaches. They pay membership dues just to cover the cost of like maintenance and whatever fees that you got to cover to like have access to the water if you have any. And to just keep costs low and the barrier to entry low for folks. I think that's done a really good job at getting a lot of people into the sport, keeping the barrier low, because that cost distributed among so many people, levels it out pretty well. But that's the problem is, it is a labor of love. Your coaches are expected to do probably the most work, not even counting any other like team management tasks that they pick up accidentally. Just because like, oh well, I'm doing this thing, so I might as well do that thing too. Like, oh, I can arrange the the logistics email for XYZ race because I'm already doing the coaching and blah blah blah. But and so I think that in order to and so I think that's where we get into this unfortunate cycle of like, if you don't have a much of an incentive to prioritize, aside from just like your love of the sport and your love of the community, at a certain point the rubber does meet the road in like how much you have to spend to just like maintain your position as a coach. You got to go to most of the races. You are probably also a high performance paddler, not always, but often are. And so you're probably got, other goals. You want to do other races just on your own. Maybe you want to do Team USA and like go to those training camps and do those time trials. And so at a certain point, like money is a constraint, time is a constraint. And I think, whenever we look at, well, what should we do in the dragon boat world? What should we do? Oftentimes, the first place we look at is Canada. What model do they have? To what extent can we map it onto the US? And I think that um, it's it's a helpful exercise because they, somebody told me like, well, Canada's system is a lot like the US system, just like, progressed like 10 more years or so. I think there's some merit to that because they've gotten to a place where they've gotten more money into the sport, a little bit more like public support in terms of like governments investing in it. Like I'm thinking of Vancouver, for instance, like their investment in like the False Creek, like Dragon Zone, like the whole compound there is just absolutely killing it with participation, and the facilities there are just fantastic. And they do get public support from from I think the city of Vancouver to just like keep that running. Um, and so I think we at least on the coaching front, it does help if like some of those costs are mitigated somehow. So I think if I had to take a stab at like what's the next step for coaches in the US, I think finding some sort of compensation for them is perhaps the next step. Um, I don't think, for me personally, I don't think paying me money is gonna help me stick around longer, just because like I'm in a new phase of my life and I'm already deeply invested, and like I've just made it work for me. But like to get new coaches in it, you're it's kind of a hard sell. You're asking them to commit more time and money to uh, you know for a position that is going to be a lot of work, and incredibly rewarding, but it's a lot of work. So I kind of think maybe that's perhaps the next phase, is like let's see if we can add a little bit more structure to clubs to pay some coaches, maybe pay some team managers, just to you know um, keep folks around just a little bit longer, and have I think we need to get folks to have more of a transition plan somehow. It's like standardize and share across the clubs, like this is a good way to transition from one to the next, so you don't have a coach that just like, I don't know, maybe their life blows up one day, and they got to just like drop everything, always having a couple of coaches in reserve, backups, that kind of thing. I think that's another opportunity there, is to like share how teams have transitioned and how to set it up, in advance. Because that'll help a lot, I think, with the longevity of our leaders, and keep them in the community longer. But also just like continue to grow the sport in general. Yeah.
Yeah, the it's always funny, like capitalism could solve some of the problems, right? Because it's one of those things, like if being a dragon boat coach was a $200,000 a year role, you would have a lot of people trying to figure out how to do that, right? But if for the same exact thing it's $0, well, like who signs up for any job that's $0? Volunteer, and like you said, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So this kind of pivots into the integration of money into a sport will change it dramatically, dynamically. Stand up paddleboard, the ultimate example of dump money on this thing and see what happens, right? And all these people own paddle boards. It's like the reinvention of the kayak. Races have prize money. People are like, getting into it. And then you take the money away and it changes, right? Like it's, now people are doing it solely because they enjoy it, they like it. Ultimately, though, participation is lower when you take away the money bags associated with it, right? So that pivots into right now, paddling and dragon boat specific is an amateur sport, right? A professional sport, easily defined, is you quit your job and you do it 20, like you wake up in the morning, you train, you eat, you sleep, you train again, right? So we really don't have that aspect in dragon boat here in the US, especially, right? And one of the questions that was posed is, if dragon boat goes into the Olympics, right? And then the outcome would be that nobody on Team USA currently would make that team, and it would be populated by other athletes from other sports that are professional athletes, full-time athletes, and whatever, crossing over, learning to do dragon boat, and changing that sport dynamic from amateurism into a professional outlet, right? So this is the one that's going to get you fired up, right? Is How do you feel about if Dragon Boat goes to the Olympics and it makes that pivot into being more of a professional outlet essentially, right? Going for Olympic gold. How do you feel about the current Team USA and their integration into it? Or do we have decathletes that just come over and figure out how to paddle and just dominate and steal all the spots?
Oh, this is a very intriguing exercise to just think about, like, what does the future of the sport look like? And I'm gonna disclaimer: let's assume that we've figured out how to reconcile the two competing governing bodies, the International
Oh my
Canoe
God. Yeah, let's not
Federation.
like that. We could just sit here and just talk about the ICF versus IDBF for the rest of our
Yeah,
lives. Yeah. So it's like you said, if
exactly.
they reach a conclusion, it gets into the Olympics one way or the other, right? So that would be the
Yep.
first step in Olympic integration. But it arrives, you can take a spot on a Dragon Boat, get Olympic gold, people quit their jobs to go for it. What happens next?
Yeah, and I think the thought of professional dragon boaters or paddlers. My understanding of Olympic athletes is they do have to be amateur, but one can not be paid to paddle, but also be basically training full time, essentially.
So that's an old Olympic rule because like
Oh.
Roger Federer has a tennis Olympic gold and he is a multimillionaire. So there's a lot of sports like LeBron James has played on the Olympic team before, professional. So the
Mhm.
amateurism part of it is so like you can receive incentive now and still pursue Olympic gold.
I see. Okay. Well, yeah, this is tricky. So, I mean, the question, like, well, then, so you have your current crop of fast athletes that are currently populating the premier team. I hope to hopefully get onto premier next cycle. And then there's like a whole bunch of, development that happened in the last cycle to bring in a bunch of new blood to the premier level. But then, so what would happen? Suddenly we get into the Olympics, the biggest stage in the world. I honestly, it would change the incentives a bit, and I think it would be tricky for amateur athletes. So for myself, let's take myself as an example. I think I can probably train maybe 14 hours a week if I'm really on top of my stuff with like meals and logistics and like balancing chores and such. And Olympic athletes are, what are they training, like 20 plus hours, pretty much full time. Um, you know, that's the thing. What I've learned through going through Premiere a couple times now is that you you do need to have a lot of horsepower, but you also really do need to know how to dragon boat. And I think one of the challenges with our like putting a team together for the US is because a lot of our athletes are so geographically spread out. Um, like we've got paddlers coming in from Hawaii, the Northwest, the Northeast, the South, like literally every corner. And it's challenging to get everybody into one location at one time, but that's how Canada trains. That's how China trains. That's how Thailand trains. They get everybody together and they paddle a lot together. And I mean, unless I think the trouble is though, is we do need to get more money into the sport in order to get that to work out. Because you've got currently a lot of athletes like self-funding themselves, maybe with some support from their local clubs in order to get into at any either senior A, senior B, or premier U24. They're self-funding using GoFundMe's. Um, and in order to I think to match the level of competition that would result from the Olympics, it would incentivize all of us to just well, this is how we reach the next level. We need to get everybody into camps much more often. We need to be training together more, and that's going to cost a lot of money, like a lot of money to get people at camps, a lot of people to support themselves. So I really hope, like, I see the financial aspect to be the primary barrier there. And if we can get money into the sport, then more money into the sport, I should say, then that might, you know, that might be a reality in the future. But until then, you know, you, you're probably going to end up relying a lot on the folks that can self-fund or fund from the community. And that probably means folks are going to have jobs and be training and probably hit a threshold at about, probably 15 to 20 hours a week of training. Um, that's not to say that, teams can't go fast training at that level. Because like look at Team Canada, like they're not professional paddlers, but they've broken world records. And they go so fast and they train a lot together. Um, but they're also a little more geographically compressed and concentrated than the US is. So yeah, I don't know. This is a fun little thing to think about because I would love it if we became an Olympic sport. If that happened in my lifetime, I'd be like, dang, that we've made it. I might be senior C at that point, but that's okay because we finally made it. I think you know I think the fact that we could get onto the biggest stage would be just like the biggest reward. And inevitably, when the dynamics at the international level change, or there's a big like infusion of cash, or just something fundamentally changes about how the sport is structured, there's always going to be resultant changes that kind of trickle down. But I do appreciate the fact that we do have such a robust like community aspect to dragon boating that I think will continue to persist regardless of like how much money is pouring in at the elite level. Um, and so I think, and the deeper I get into dragon boating, the more that I realize that aspect of it is one of the most rewarding parts. I think I love competing internationally. I love competing at the elite level, but the fact that we are in many ways a community driven sport still, I think bodes well for our longevity, and also continued growth. Because it is, I swear, the biggest gateway drug into paddle sports that exists in the US. So yeah, I don't know. It would be an interesting thing to see like what happens if we get to that stage. Honestly, I think we'll be able to deal with it and figure out how to. I mean, at the end of the day, we're supposed to be doing this because it's fun, even if winning golds is fun. So I don't know. I think it'll I think it'll be a good push if we ever get to that stage.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
makes sense on paper because when you watch sprint canoe and sprint kayak, I love it. A lot of us we watch it and it's just like, man, that's amazing. But your average person is like, yeah, I don't like whatever, right? And they're like in a kayak going 15 miles an hour, who cares, right? But a dragon boat has this star power where like you look at it and like your regular person's like, what am I looking at? That looks really neat, cool. It's got a dragon head on it, right? And it turns into viewership and viewership turns into money. And then the more spectators that are watching it, the lingerie football league for women, right? Why were they watching that? Like, man, she's got a great, deep ball. It's like whatever it takes to get people interested in something brings viewership up, brings more money into it, right? And then I always like the idea. It's like if it becomes professional, one of the most applicable athletes that we have is Nevin Harrison, winning Olympic gold in the C1 canoe. Right? She's an obstacle course runner, and then goes to like an Olympic training thing to like find another sport. Does that, and in like what 2 or 3 years wins Olympic gold. Right? So you have this athlete that literally comes out of nowhere. Right? Starts doing it when she's like 15 or 16, 18, 19, the best to ever do it. Right? And when you have this professional outlet, it opens the door for athletes like that to literally come out of nowhere to do it. And the sprint canoe, there's a balance dynamic, there is a steering dynamic. Dragon boat is pretty simple. You sit in the boat, no balance, paddle together. It's a small paddle as well, not this giant ass like sprint canoe paddle, right? So the barrier to entry into the sport specifically is very low compared to all other paddle sports. A K1, impossible to sit in. C1, impossible to kneel in, right? So you take that barrier away and so on. And so now you, like I said, you open this door for a decathlete is good at 10 events in track and field, right? You give that guy 2 or 3 years, he's already training full time. Does he now occupy a spot from somebody that's been on Team USA in the past? And that's where the sport changes, right? Like you have this integration of people that are going to come into it that are doing it for something that isn't out of love, right? And the current community as we have it now is based on amateurs. We all do it because we like it. We love paddling. We want to, hone our skill set and do these things. And there's that level of, the community based on that. And changing it to professionalism takes that away. It's like a cold steel where people are doing it for personal ambition to get this Olympic gold. And once they get it, they're done, right? Like I don't really even like paddling. I'm just doing it because, right? And so I think is a good point he had that holding on to the community that we have now is very awesome, right? It's very warm and cozy. We all like paddling. We all like going to these events and doing these things. And I don't know if having a professional outlet diminishes that. If it because I would view it as being like a separate entity, right? It would be like it's still paddling, but it's not the same kumbaya of like, hey, like these people aren't going to go to a race on Saturday and joke around, right? They're only going to train, they're only going to do these giant international events, and that's their only role in the community. But it's fun to think about, right? Because I would like to see it just to like what do those athletes look like? Like what does an optimized dragon boat athlete crossover? What would that be beyond somebody that just likes it and pursues it versus somebody that was built for the sport specifically?
Yeah, and I think back to my own experience on Premiere, like if I tried out and someone comes in who is like, basically training full time and just destroys my time and like in the time trial. And I would have no qualms about giving that person like quote unquote my spot. They are clearly faster and they are gonna more likely to bring home some hardware from the competition, which is, at the end of the day, that is kind of what these um like that is the goal of these Team USA programs. It's to bring home hardware. And I think at that point, like, yeah, this person's faster than me. Go race, bring home the good stuff. I will happily cheer on a team comprised of like absolutely fast paddling legends, regardless of where they came from. Because additionally, at the end of the day, you also need to know how to dragon boat in order to do well in dragon boat. Because you can't just put in, a bunch of folks who are fast in other arenas and be like, all right, use this thing to go fast. Like you do need a decent amount of specificity. And there are certain skills that the dragon boat does demand, especially like precision and attention to detail, that I think really get like, especially at like as the sport would even develop further at the top end, like that attention to detail is really going to be the difference between getting on the podium or not when everybody's finishing, like back in the day with all the sprint or even now, like all these sprint canoe and kayak races that are, the margins are within fractions of a second, just like in competitive dragon boat races. Like the difference in power in order to eke out that extra margin is huge, and it could be come down to like, all right, everybody's rotating and applying pressure the same way. And so, if at that point they will be faster than me and they will probably be a better dragon boater than me. And yeah, I'll be turning on, NBC and watching the highlights and cheering them on from where I'm sitting at home.
Yeah, and it's just cool to think about like that there would be another level to the sport, but the only avenue to get those athletes would be in like, some outlet, right? People will devote their life to an Olympic gold. They've already planned like for the next 4 years, I'm going to train full time for this idea. And for what, like I'm a trust fund baby or something. I don't know. Like people just have infinite resources at their disposal, right? Like life isn't fair or whatever. And they're able to do this 4 years of training, right? You get this athlete in the sport versus you have these talented, super coordinated superhumans and they do other things, right? They're like, hey, if I can shoot this rock into that hoop, I can get paid a lot of money or whatever, right? Like, you have your ball sports where people will invest their time because of the money outlet. But the Olympic gold is one of those things that supersedes money for a lot of people. That even if I obtain this pinnacle, I might not get paid out in the same way, but it's something that it lasts a lifetime. And like I said, for people, it's worth committing their life to, right? Where they for the next 4 years, I don't have a job, I don't have responsibilities, I don't have to walk my dog, I just have to eat, train, sleep, and my rest period is written down. I have 17 hours and 13 minutes to rest before the next workout, and then I go get a massage or whatever, right? And so it's kind of cool to look at that. So looking at the premier at the international level, China, dun 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 dun, very good, right? Especially their guys, right? And do they paddle in a concentration camp? I'm not sure. Whatever it is, but China has an excellent sprint program, right? So they their athletes, I don't think, have won an Olympic gold in sprint canoe, especially, but they always have two athletes in the final, right? Which is a really tough thing to do because you only get two allocations and both of your dudes make it into eight, right? And across the board, I don't know if those sprint athletes do dragon boat, but like you said, infrastructure wise, they take dragon boat real freaking serious over there, right? There's government support. They're able to train together, eat together, live together, whatever the setup is, right? What is there anything additional that you could think of that the US can do to try and close the gap on countries that take dragon boat very seriously? Even from us, again, looking at from an amateur standpoint, you have to self-pay, you have to go through all these things individually, seat to seat, versus some of these countries, they don't have those obstacles, right? They're able to just optimize the athletes, put them on the race course. Is it feasible to defeat some of these superpower teams in the races they're good at, the 200, the 500? Like, does Team USA ever beat Team China on the men and mixed side in that?
Well, I mean, for like we already do beat them at the longer
The
distances. That
2K,
is,
that's right.
yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
got we got the 2K. We've had a lot of success in the 1K as well. I think that's partly because um that's the mode of the athletes that we recruit, like a lot of exceptional long distance athletes who also know how to sprint. um and so but it's the 500 and the 200s that require a lot of top end power and a lot of precision. And I keep coming back to, like, we just got to get our athletes together more, training more together. um and a lot of that will sort itself out. Like, a lot of times, you know it's challenging to get us all together, and so we'll try and find some races here and there to, like, tune up a bit. But sometimes it doesn't work out quite as well. And I think we could all benefit from spending even more time together. And to the credit of, I want to say, last cycle, Premier Women coach Megan Roberts, who really did invest in getting her crew together a lot in the lead up to, I call it Pattaya 2, the 2023 Pattaya, and they did fantastically. I want to say that they did, like, their medal count was the best it had been since Prague, which I think was in the late aughts. I want to say, don't quote me on that, but it, like, did really well. So I think that to the extent we can get our crew together more and more and more leading up to the competition, the better we're going to do. But again, yeah, it's just like, how do we just not blow up everybody's PTO balance? How do we not blow up everybody's budgets? And I think, it does unfortunately all come down to money. If we can just get our folks together more, we're going to see better results. And honestly, getting to meet all of the folks at like having been on Premiere and meeting all of these cross-discipline paddlers is like honestly one of the most rewarding things about it, and just like is a consciousness expanding exposure to paddle sports. And so, if we can get our folks more together, I mean, that's also just going to grow our sport, more connections even further, and get more cross-disciplining. I think, that classic concept of a waterman, as opposed to, I am this one paddle sport athlete and that's it, So yeah, I think in order, like, we already do, I want to say we already do compete very well with the other sports, but if I had to think like what's going to get us the next increment of advantage, I think, yeah, even more time together is really going to be the ticket.
Yeah, I think it's like the American in me, where it's just like all gold medals all the time. You know what I mean? Team USA. It's like you're watching an event, and it's like you expect them to get gold, right? And it's always something to strive for. And it, like you said, it's a fun thought activity, trying to push those barriers. So that is it. Is there anything else that you wanted to shout out or say? You got any plugs? Any final words of wisdom for the paddling pursuit listeners?
I think if I just wanted to put an extra plug in for trying out uh more paddlecraft, and not just like, give it a try once or twice and be like, okay, then I'm done. Like, I think really strongly that every paddlecraft has something to teach and offer for whatever, say, your primary paddle discipline is. So I like I said before, I would consider myself a long distance flatwater outrigger paddler, but everything I've done in all the other paddling arenas has offered me something really beneficial, that I've been able to, take back lessons, take back wisdom, take back just improved fitness and technique from being challenged in different ways. So I would encourage folks to think of themselves as a paddler, and not just like, a marathon paddler, a dragon boat paddler, a outrigger paddler. Like, try some stuff. It's going to be tricky, challenging. You probably won't be good at it. In fact, you definitely won't be good at it right away. And that's part of the point, is like that's where the growth happens. And don't be discouraged by it. Everybody everybody sucks at something initially, and you just keep learning. You find the folks that do know what they're doing, and across the board, I've encountered people that just love sharing their wisdom in like a let's grow the sport kind of way. Let me teach you all the hard lessons I've had to learn, so you don't have to learn them the hard way. So I guess I really can't emphasize enough, like, branching out is a great growth opportunity, and asking the like the wise ones in your network that know more than you do for whatever nuggets of wisdom they can share, is a great way to just like be to grow and see new things and go to different places. Can't recommend it enough.
So to that same point, when are you going to learn the sprint canoe next? I know they're in your area. I know where the club is at. I know where you're at. I'll pay somebody to bring you a boat whenever you would like to try it out.
Oh gosh, I don't. I still have yet to get into a sprint canoe. I think I might
You're a
ought
smart
to.
man. That's why you're too smart to get in the damn thing. Thing's a
Well,
death trap.
I mean, my balance is just like not great. It was only recently that I learned how to like properly brace a right brace on my OC1. I'm pretty sure I would just spend the time just flipping over constantly, but I should try it one of these times just to appreciate how hard all those folks that do sprint canoe
When
are
you get the hang
working.
of it, we can go to Chattajack together. We can draft each other. It'll be a beautiful experience. So write that down for your 2040 Chattajack
Exactly.
experience in
Yes, and
90.
then Ian Ross can show us how it's all done and just be miles ahead of us.
All right, James, thank you so much for taking the time coming on the show. And that is it. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the Paddle Pursuit. We'll see you all next Monday for our next episode.